Hello and welcome to the Dyno Six Pack Dynasty Football Podcast. We got a really fun episode today. We're doing kind of a modified version of a conference preview here, and I'm joined by Dennis Michelson. He's going to help me break down the AFC today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Jordan. I always love to remind people that when it comes to fantasy football, year-end stats are lazy stats, folks. Use better stats, use some weekly stats, and that's what we're all about over at the Science of Fantasy Football.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm very intrigued to get your take on on all the topics we have lined up today. Then, because you'll probably have like a little bit of a different viewpoint where you're coming at them, like where I did it. So that's always fun. I did the NFC earlier, and it's kind of the same thing. There was like 8 or 9 of the 15 teams that we kind of had like opposing viewpoints on. I was like, oh, this is really good stuff. So I'm excited to get the same thing going here. Before we get going here, make sure you guys hit subscribe and like and catch the NFC video as well as all the other different shows that we have on our channel here. Scrolling across the bottom here, we have memberships over at fantasy6pack.net/plans. We got rankings, DFS, and betting stuff. You can get custom advice for your leagues. Best of all, you get access to like our Discord where you can like DM me and all of our other writers and analysts in there and just get like instant responses on your fantasy questions. It's a lot of fun over there. Like you can post a question and usually in a minute or two you get 6 or 7 different answers. So lots of fun, yeah. So make sure you head over there, fantasy6pack.net/plans. Now that we got all that out of the way, we won't waste time and we'll get right into it here. We're going to start with probably not the favorite, but probably the second or third favorite in the AFC, and that's the Buffalo Bills here. The scenario that I'm going to be kind of following there, and the storyline that I'm following here to see is Gabe Davis, man. Everyone thought he was going to have a huge breakout last season. He didn't really explode to the point that people wanted to. He feels like he could be a little bit of a post-hype sleeper at this point. It seems like Dalton Kincaid has rightly taken a lot of attention this offseason, where it kind of makes it a little bit of an afterthought. He's slid in drafts. So what are your thoughts on Gabe Davis going into this season?
So Gabe Davis is a player that in the past has not been very well received by my weekly values fantasy stat. Basically, we look at the best 10 games that a player has had over the course of the season. I actually use a 2-year season outlook. I look at a 2-year data set and I use the best third of games from there. So it ends up being about 10 games over the course of that time frame. And when you look at Gabe Davis, he always catches the headlines because he has his 2 touchdown games and he has his big scoring
Mm-hmm.
games, and they've
And they're
quite
in
often
prime
been
time playoff games.
yeah, yeah, they've
Yeah.
been late in the season when everybody needs it, and he's been sitting on your bench because he's disappointed you most of the year. Gabe Davis is a player that I'm very reluctant to draft in either my dynasty startups or my redrafts. But baby, give me more Gabe Davis in my best ball at his current
Mm.
value. He is falling way too low. And the problem that I've had with Gabe Davis in the past hasn't been the player Gabe Davis. It's been the anticipation of expecting this on a weekly basis. He's not going to be that.
Right.
He's got Stephon Diggs to contend with, who's going to be a monster when it comes to target share. But Gabe
Mhm.
Davis, where he is right now at his ADP, he is even a guy that I'm looking at in a few redraft leagues that are deeper, where we play more flex
Yeah.
positions, because I'll take a shot at that. In a one flex, typical, casual player redraft league, I'm still not hot on Gabe Davis as a guy that I depend on as my second or third wide receiver. He's a bench player or he's a bye week replacement for me. But in deeper leagues, the deeper the league gets, the more I want upside. And in best balls, I love Gabe Davis this year. Just drafted him in an FPPC best ball draft recently.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. Like he's definitely a guy you want in best ball more than anywhere else. And reason kind of leads right into my prediction for this team. And I'm intrigued to get your thoughts on this one. I think by the second half of the season, like Dalton Kincaid has clearly passed Gabe Davis as like a preferred option in the passing options. I think he'll be the second option behind Diggs. I think it'll be a little bit slow, like second half of the season. I know traditionally tight ends come on a little bit slow, but I don't think he's going to get used. I don't think he's going to be used as a slot receiver necessarily, but he's not going to be used like the traditional tight end. He's going to spend more on outside. I just think he provides something that nobody else on the team has in terms of his size and speed combination. So where are you at on Dalton Cade for this year and kind of down the road?
When Dalton Kincaid was going about 125 as his ADP overall pick in best
Mm-hmm.
ball drafts, I was loving it. Recently in FPPC, and you'll hear me quote them a lot of times. And the reason I do is because everybody playing there is playing for money. And when you're
Right.
betting money on anything in sports, you're going to get a more honest reflection of a
Yeah.
player's value. And we just like FPPC. It's a league that
Mm-hmm.
the Professor Fantasy and I, John Bush and I play a lot of leagues over there and have a lot of money on the line. So we better know their ADP. But he's
Yeah.
recently been up to about 105 in best ball. And at that point, he's a tough buy for me. I agree with
Mm-hmm.
you on Dalton Kincaid. He's not a tight end. He just has tight end eligibility. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the big key here. He's going to line up like a Kelsey, where,
Mm-hmm.
70% of the time or more, he is not going to be on the line in a typical tight end position. And it's
Mm-hmm.
because of that, I think he's going to be a value. But I like him better also in best ball. In best ball, I don't really care about a player's consistency. I care about his upside. And when it comes to upside, Dalton Kincaid's going to have some big weeks. And I agree with you. Might not be week 1, 2, 3, 4, but by the time you get to week 6, 10, 12, and those magical fantasy football playoffs, I think Dalton Kincaid's going to be quite the guy to own in different formats, and especially in best ball.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully, in dynasty leagues, so you can capitalize on
Oh,
that potential slow start. Where hopefully the guy that spent a late first, early second on it, kind of panicking, and you can move, like a David Njoku type player and get Kincaid plus another asset, and at that point, then you've picked up something, and then you have Kincaid the future there.
by year 2 or 3, I think Dalton Kincaid's going to be a top 5 tight end
Uh,
here in every format of fantasy football. He's one of the guys that I was drafting as early, and I got a few razzle dazzles for this in the old chat rooms. I was drafting him as early as the 6th pick in the first round in rookie drafts because that's how high I feel on Dalton Kincaid. I was getting him early in the second, early in the season. But as the drafts happened farther and farther into the year, we were especially after the NFL draft, the ones that
mm-hmm.
happened, month after the NFL draft when people actually got a chance to see some of his OTA film and some of his combine footage. All of a sudden, hey, this guy is a real deal. But yeah, I was taking him as early as 106, depending on my team's needs, and
Mm-hmm.
had no problem taking him that early. I think this is a game changer at the tight end position. I don't think now I mentioned he'll be lining up like a Travis Kelsey. I'm not looking at Kelsey value. I'm looking at
Right.
Kittle
Oh yeah.
value, and Kittle
Yeah, that's fair.
value is not bad value.
No, not at all. Not at a weak position traditionally. So we're going to go and kick it over to Miami now. Another really explosive offense for fantasy. Everybody there and they're healthy. The storyline that I'm following here is, I mean, I'm not going out on a limb here. It's probably what everybody's following. Is Tua going to be able to stay healthy this year? In my opinion, that's all that really matters for this offense. Like if he's there and he's healthy, this offense is going to be humming. They're going to be a legitimate competitor to try and take this division here. Um, where are you at on Tua for this upcoming season here?
Well, fantasy football players make no sense. Okay. They absolutely make no sense. If you look at the wide receiver room for the Miami Dolphins, both Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are going so early in drafts. I mean, they are going earlier and earlier. The wide receiver room combined ADP between the two players is the best in the league. It is the lowest combination of ADP in the league.
Yeah, for
AJ
sure.
Brown and Devontae Smith are the closest over on the NFC side, but Tua isn't even in the top third of quarterbacks being drafted. In fact, he's closer to the bottom third than he is the
It's
top third. He's
crazy.
right in the middle, and it makes no sense. So you either believe that Tua is going to stay healthy, in which case he's a top 8 quarterback prospect, or you think he's going to get
Yeah.
hurt, in which case you should be undervaluing and avoiding Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. You can't have it both ways because the backup quarterback ain't going to be producing top 8 stats for both Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill.
Hmm.
Personally, I don't think you can predict injuries. This was a concussion issue with Tua.
Hmm.
It's about not learning how to fall right and how to not being smart enough to get rid of the ball before you get creamed. I think he learned his lesson last year, and I think
Yeah.
he's going to be a little quicker on the release. I think they're going to build the offense to make him a little quicker on the release. And as a result, I'm investing in Hill, I'm investing in Waddle, and I'm investing in Tua.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to look to get it get out of his hands quicker, like you said. And then I also think that you look at what they did in the draft. You got Devin A. Chain. I think that kind of leads into my prediction, where I think that they're going to have a little bit more of a running attack this year. So for the season, my prediction is Raheem Mostert. He's going to lead the team in rushing for the season. But during the second half, Devin A. Chain is going to leave him and kind of clearly becoming the guy you want for fantasy down the stretch. What are your thoughts on the backfield here?
Yeah, I think we're looking at a very, very typical running back by committee situation. And in redraft leagues, I'm kind of avoiding the Miami running back room because I can't figure it out. But
Mhm.
in best ball, I am buying, and I'm buying anybody,
They're going
because
late.
they're going late and they will have some big weeks. So, they're going to score touchdowns. And that's what you want with your best ball team. You want guys who are going to score touchdowns.
Mhm.
Hey, folks, this fantasy football thing, it ain't that tough. If you got a guy who's on a good offense, you want him on your team. And in best ball, you
Right.
don't care about running back by committees. You don't care about anything except, can this guy is this offense going to score or aren't they? And when it comes to
Mhm.
Miami, they're going to score a lot of points this year. So I kind of like to have two of the three running backs on that team on my best ball squads. I'm just not sure which two of the four you want to have all the time. But I agree with you. The Rook is the guy that you definitely want to anchor your team with, and he's coming pretty cheap right now.
Yeah, he's definitely the long term play. So, like, kind of the opposite of the explosive offense of the Dolphins, we're going to head over to New England next, who, for fantasy wise, is basically the exact opposite situation there. They just don't have a ton of talent there in terms of like fantasy players there. The storyline that I'm following is Mac Jones a franchise quarterback? Is he just kind of the holdover for the season? I know for me personally, I lean more to just a holdover. I wasn't a huge fan of him coming in. But there is a large crowd of like very smart people that are smarter than me that are Mac Jones believers. Side of that debate do you come in on?
Well, I'm a Mac Jones believer for 2023. And
Okay,
then
yeah.
next year, I'll decide if I'm a Mac Jones believer again. Um, there's a very good chance that Mac Jones is a very average NFL quarterback. There ain't
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with being the 16th best person at your given
Sure.
profession.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, having said that, that's not a guy I want in a lot of dynasty formats, unless it's a best ball dynasty format, which I'm in a couple of those leagues. Then I'll grab Mac Jones. Why? Because he's starting and he's going to stay starting all year long. I don't think we're going to see the Bailey Zappi experiment unless
I hope
Jones
not.
gets hurt. Yeah. So I don't, I'm not, in love with any of the quarterbacks right now, with the New England Patriots, but there's nobody that's going to be challenging Mac Jones unless he gets hurt. So that makes him a worthy choice in super flex leagues because, again, he's cheap and he's not horrible. Okay. He's just an average quarterback in the NFL, and it's on an offense that is about average in the number of times they throw the ball. So they're going to run the ball primarily, but they'll be about 17th, 18th in passing percentage of passing plays. That's enough to eke out some good points for you if you got the right guy.
Yeah, definitely. Um, if you play him in Superflex League, I think that he's a good quarterback three. If you can have him there as kind of a bye week fill in. passing game, like I think Juju is a little bit interesting. Tyquan Thornton for like a long-term play, but really the only guys I'm really interested in for this season and this team is going to be the two guys in the backfield. Ramondre Stevenson, Zeke Elliott, and when the signing happened at first, when they just signed Zeke a week or so ago, the takeaway that it seemed like a lot of people had was like, oh, this is nothing. Like Ramondre still unquestioned the guy, and I don't know. My prediction is that I think he's going to play a bigger role and be a little bit more of a headache than people think. And my reasoning on that is he was still an effective like RB2 flex play last year, and that was taking work away from Tony Pollard, who, in my opinion, more talented than Ramondre Stevenson. I think Bill Belichick likes the established veterans there. So I think that it's going to be a thing where like he's going to have that as deep league flex value. And during your bye weeks, I think you're going to be able to throw him in there. I think Ramondre Stevenson's going to, instead of being kind of that low end RB1, I think he's going to be more squarely into like the RB2 category where there's some guys that finish behind him that are going to leap him this year. So I do think Zeke's going to take some touchdowns. I think that he's going to get short credit. And like he played last year with a hurt knee and he was still fairly effective for your fantasy teams. I think it's going to be a very similar storyline this year. How you look at this backfield coming into it?
Zeke takes away all of my interest in Harrison Strong, and now, of course, Strong got traded. So I think that was more of the move that now you say Pollard's better than Ramondre Stevenson. It's some things that he does. I agree with that. But there are some things that Ramondre Stevenson does better than Tony Pollard. So I think the fact that Pollard was able to keep the incumbent off the field, I think the New England Patriots were going to be a running back by committee no matter what. And I think what this signing does more than anything else is it adds some sanity to that backfield and your decisions as a fantasy football manager. If you've been managing fantasy football teams for more than 5 years, you absolutely hate Coach Belichick. Coach B will screw with your mind on a weekly basis because you won't know who the hot hand is going to be any given week. And Damian Harris and Stevenson would go back and forth and split, and it was a headache and a half last year. I think we're going to see a little bit more of a sane decision tree in the New England backfield this year. And this is why. I think they understand that Ezekiel Elliott has a lot of mileage on those knees. I think they want to keep Elliott as healthy as possible. And so one of the ways to do that is to have him be the change of pace back for you. So you got Stevenson, who can do a little bit of everything. He's got a little bit of power, but he's got a little bit of speed. He's good out of the backfield, catching passes. He is your three down back. But how about bringing in a battering ram like Ezekiel Elliott, who also is really good when you get him the ball out in the flat? So now all of a sudden you've got a guy who he comes into the lineup. You're not sure if you're going to be throwing or running because he can catch the ball versus a Damian Harris who was just going to be best between the tackles. And you didn't have to really think that they were going to be passing a lot to him. So I look at Ramondre Stevenson as a great value in all formats of fantasy football. I really like him. But at Science of Fantasy Football, we do a lot of research projects. One of the research projects that I've been working on for the last 2 seasons is a concept that I call play them both. And what that is all about is you don't have to decide if you have them both. You play them both on any given week. One guy in the starting running back, one guy in one of your multiple flexes. The more flex starters you have in your league, the more effective the play it both strategy works. So instead of guessing who is going to be the hot hand, you play them both. And what we're watching is the combined total of points between those two guys. It fluctuates for sure, but you pick up both ends. And so we're charting how good that combo is against the median at the position over the last 7 years. And that's the study that is going live now, going on this year again for the second straight year. And we're going to see how this works. And it's in beta testing in a bunch of my leagues. So the ultimate sign of success and failure in fantasy football is what, Jordan? Money. So if it
Yes.
returns, gives me a good return on investment, I'm going to support this theory. And we're doing the testing right now at scienceoffantasyfootball.com. And I think this Patriots backfield is a great combination for this because Ezekiel Elliott is good enough to keep Harris off the field. So you're not going to see as much of him as we did last year when he got sort of sprinkled in with
Yeah.
Harris and Stevenson. So I I liked this pickup as a Stevenson owner in Dynasty because I looked at it and I said, oh, at least it's a little more predictable this year. The only threats that I have over Stevenson point totals is if they get a lead in a game and they want to salt it away. Ezekiel Elliott does not fumble, and that's what
One of the
Belichick loves. So he's a good battering ram. He's going to wear a defense down. So game scripted, you might see some weeks where Ezekiel Elliott gets more touches than Stevenson, but generally, I don't expect them to be winning a lot of games by a big margin. I think you're going to see both guys used, and I'm looking at maybe 50% of the touches for Stevenson, 35, 40% for Zeke, and the rest going off to a bunch of other people.
That sounds right to me. Yeah. So let's round it out here with the team in the division that arguably had like the most headlines this offseason, and that is the New York Jets here. So my storyline that I am following by them is it's pretty simple. It's who's going to be catching passes behind Garrett Wilson. Alan Lazard's a favorite there. Cole Hardman they brought in. They have a couple other guys there. Who is your favorite to lead the team in catches behind Garrett Wilson this year?
Nobody. I have a feeling that I don't want anybody beyond Garrett Wilson. Now, in best ball, I have kind of gone against the grain late in drafts, and I'll bet on McCole Hardman. He is a guy, especially with Corey Davis being gone. McCole Hardman is the kind of guy that can be the deep threat for you, and he might be able to cash in. But I think Lazard, Cobb, and the cast of thousands are going to split those targets. I hate to do this to you because I'm the worst guest in the world, but I got one guy I got to mention on that New England Patriots team.
Oh, yeah.
Mike Gesicki is going to be a league winner in best ball. He is a free square addition, and his back class, which is again something we sort of invented at Science of Fantasy Football. Look at the back class of a player, where his weekly value used to be when he was being used properly. And last year, the Miami Dolphins offense wasn't geared to using a tight end. Now, that if you look back to the last year that offense, that he performed in an offense where a tight end was being used properly, he had a pretty darn good season. So I look at Gesicki as, Gesicki's a free square guy in best ball, especially.
I like it.
And back to the Jets, getting back on topic. The number two target guy is likely to be a running back. I would not be shocked to see a running back be the number two target guy. And I'm wondering what's going to shake out in the tight end situation. Right now, you look at the tight ends and you go, ugh. Well, Aaron Rodgers loves to throw to tight ends. Somebody's going to emerge. And hey, Uzama had some good weeks way back when he was healthy. Now, he doesn't often stay healthy. And I'm just kind of wondering what Jeremy Ruckert, is he going to make the roster? Is he going to make the field? He's the talented kind of receiver at the tight end position that Rodgers could match up with quite well. Rodgers being tight end heavy in the red zone over the years, it makes me wonder who's going to emerge as the tight end to want on your best ball rosters for the Jets, and I'm not sure I got that one figured out.
Oh, yeah, that's outside of Garrett Wilson and the running backs. I don't have any idea here. The one prediction I do have for this team, and that's going to tie in more for like the dynasty teams that are trying to contend and win now. And that's that I think Aaron Rodgers has like one more MVP level season in him this season. One of the guys that was best at with playing with a chip on his shoulder, best at holding a grudge, and he definitely has a reason to have that now. So I think he's going to come out one more year. I don't think he's going to win MVP. I would put that money on Mahomes anytime he's healthy. But I think he's going to be in that conversation where he finishes as about 6 to 10 fantasy quarterback for you, where you're getting him way later than that in drafts. And I think he's going to be a league winner for some of the contending teams that can put in as your quarterback two, and then get quarterback one production half the weeks.
Yeah, he is definitely a guy that I've got in a bunch of dynasty leagues, and I wasn't moving him because there
Mhm.
comes a point with old players, Jordan, where their trade value is such a low deal. I
Yeah,
don't believe in really moving players that I find useful, even if they're at the end of their career, for just like a second or third round draft pick
right.
in
Agreed.
a rookie draft. Who cares? I don't, but when I make a deal, I always ask for an additional second or third pick because I want as many of those dart throws as possible.
Mhm.
But with an
Absolutely.
older player like Rodgers, I'm gonna ride him right to the end of his
Yeah.
career.
Same. Hmm.
Yeah, if if I'm out of contention and somebody's crazy enough to offer me a first round pick for him, I'll move him. But in the meantime, that's not the value right now, so I will continue to play him and use him as my second quarterback in Superflex and be very happy.
I completely agree with you on that one right there. No argument back at all. So let's head north for the next team here. Where we're going to go to the Baltimore Ravens. The situation and storyline that I'm following here is Lamar finally going to play in more of a pass first offense where he can pick his spots as a runner? Because that's always this year is that Todd Monken coming in is going to change it. And he led some good offenses with Georgia the last couple of years. Um, I'm not sure that I buy. I do think they'll be more pass focused, but I don't think it'll be to the extent that it's kind of getting led on to me. But what do you think that the Todd Monken effect is going to be on this offense and that for Lure?
So a lot of times when a new offensive coordinator comes in, people look at what he did in the past.
Mm,
And, this is a great example. And so is Eric Bieniemy with the Washington Commanders. And
mm,
everybody's like, oh man, these are offenses that were dynamic and they were great. Was that because the head coach on the team you were working with wanted it that way? Some
right.
offensive coordinators are geniuses that come up with really clever new offensive ideas. Other offensive coordinators are really good at executing the style of offense that the head coach wants to see.
Sure.
I don't know where he falls in that
Yeah.
ranking. And he's also coming from college to the pros. Is it going to be
Always
different?
sketchy.
I think he's going to follow the lead of a very experienced, very good head coach who's got a hell of a winning record over the
Yeah.
course of his career. So I believe we're going to see a little more passing, but I don't think this is gonna turn into a, run and gun offense. I think
Mm,
they're still gonna be relatively conservative because their offensive core or their head coach is relatively conservative, and that outweighs whatever we expect from an offensive coordinator, especially first year on the job in the NFL. You kidding me? If he comes out there and he convinces the head coach, who's had a great track record, to all of a sudden start throwing the ball 60% of the time and they lose, it's the head coach's job that will be up in the air instead of the offensive coordinators. They'll both be
right.
out of town. So I
Yeah.
don't think you're going to be looking at a situation where it's going to be a run and gun offense. Now, having said that, I've been following Lamar Jackson ever since his days at Louisville. This
Hmm.
is a guy who he's got a live arm, man. He
Oh yeah.
threw a ton of touchdowns in his MVP season. It's not
Hmm.
like he ran for 35 touchdowns that season. He can throw the ball, folks. He just hasn't had any wide receivers the last 2 years.
Yes.
And I'm not sure what he's got at wide receiver this year either. Obviously, Mark Andrews is the best receiver on that team at tight end. Zay
Hmm.
Flowers is an interesting player, but he's a rookie who might be rather one dimensional in what he can do in the game. Rashad Bateman, what the hell is he? I haven't seen enough of him to know what he is because we haven't seen him for more than 4 games straight ever in his short career. And OBJ, man, can make some fabulous plays, but this isn't 5, 6 years ago. So I'm not sure what they have in Baltimore at wide receivers. So that is another reason to be rather conservative. But then I look at the running back situation. I'm like, I ain't in love with these running backs as far as a run heavy offense either.
Right.
And you don't want Lamar Jackson to have another 1,000-yard rushing season. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that offense evolves in Baltimore.
Yeah, my prediction for this team is kind of along the lines of what you're saying with the new wide receiving group. It's the best cast of receivers in theory that he's had so far. My prediction is that Zay Flowers, by the end of the year, clearly emerges as like the best option, not just long term for Dynasty, but for this season as well. Too, we're down the end of the season in the fantasy playoffs. He's going to be a guy that you can throw in there in like your deeper flex spots, and you're going to be very happy with the production there.
And I always have like PTSD when it comes to looking at the Baltimore roster this year in the preseason because it's the Laquan Treadwell factor. He was on the roster to start the season, and I was here's the thing, Jordan. Sometimes we don't own our failures in fantasy football.
Fair.
I am shocked that Treadwell didn't become a player. He was one of the guys that I was convinced would be the player. In fact, I probably have him still on a dynasty roster just because I was too afraid to cut him and have him turn into something. But, I jokingly say with Baltimore, when some of these guys show up on the roster heading into the season, it's like, can you just cut him from the roster, please, when you get
Help
down
me
to
out
53? I just want to see him cut so I don't have to worry about him anymore.
Man, so the Treadwell, he wasn't one that got me heavy, but one that did. Similar story with Dorial Green Beckham, like a couple years before that. Man, when he got with Tennessee, I was like, oh man, this guy's like the next unsung, like the next superstar. Oh yeah, just never worked out. Let's kick over to the next team here. And the storyline here for Cincinnati, it's not big of a story. It's not as much of a mystery as a lot of them. It comes down to Joey Burrow. Joey Burrow, man, how does his calf muscle, does it affect him into the season? Is there something he's able to put him behind right away? He is a pocket passer, so in theory, hopefully that doesn't affect him as much. He doesn't have to get out and run. But he does make plays with his legs extended, so he's not like a complete statue there in the pocket. So it's something that if he's limited, that could affect his game a little bit. That could, instead of letting him finish as like the fantasy quarterback 3 or 4 this year, maybe that drops him down more to like 9 or 10 if he has a few games where he's a little bit limited. So are you worried at all about Joe Burrow in here, or are you not worried? You're ready to just ride it out?
Yeah. Here's the thing, Jordan. I remember the years of fantasy football. I mean, obviously, I've been playing this game for longer than some fantasy football analysts have been alive. And I remember back in the day there you didn't get instant reports from camp. You didn't find out the minute somebody, reached for their leg in camp. You got reports at the end of the week, and the guys didn't get too excited about what's going on because they were there. Well, now you got like 4,000 fantasy analysts out there that need to have a splash of a story every day. So the minute somebody has an owie, we overreact. And yeah, I understand the calf muscles can be a serious injury. And it's no laughing matter and all that kind of stuff. Joe Burrow is tough, man. The guy came back from a serious knee injury his rookie year, came back faster than anybody expected, and came back better than he was the year before as a rookie, and had no trouble at all. And
The
it would be
appendicitis last year too. Same thing this past year.
yeah, it's like, come on, this is not some wimpy McGeever, out there. He's a guy that's gonna be tough, and he's gonna be better than you expect him to be. This almost reminds me, Jordan, of remember when Jamar Chase was a rookie, and the camp reports came out because he said, "Wow, this ball is different. It doesn't have the little stripe on it. I'm
The
having
stripes
trouble
on it.
picking it
Yeah.
up." And
Yeah.
everybody ran with that as, oh my gosh, he is a wasted first round pick. And I'm like, really? Like,
Mm.
the guy said something honest his first day in camp, basically.
Yeah.
I think he's going to adjust,
Mm.
and it's just so silly sometimes how we overreact to things that go on in fantasy football. And I think this Joe Burrow story is one of them. Either that or I'm going to have a really bad year in my home league because Joe Burrow is the guy that I put my faith in. Now, I did back him up, but which I usually don't do in regular redraft leagues. So I did
Mhm.
show a little concern, but I think he'll be just fine.
I hope so, man. I have him in a few leagues there too. Prediction time for this team, and this one's a little bit more for like the deep league dynasty guys here. This isn't going to have any impact in this year, probably even a ton of impact next year. But Andre Iasovius, the rookie that drafted
Ooh.
here, I think by the end of this season, he's going to make Tyler Boyd expendable, which kind of has two parts. I think he's going to become a guy that steps in and becomes a handcuff for Chase and Higgins, which, the wide receiver handcuff you don't hear a lot of, but I do think that he's a guy for could be doing that. I'll circle back to that. Another thing that I think makes Tyler Boyd expendable, where he moves on and maybe he can step in as a wide receiver two somewhere, because he is one of the better wide receiver threes in the league. He's not, arguably the best wide receiver three in the league. He's right there in that conversation. But one of the things I liked about Andre Iasovius, and I apologize if I'm butchering that name, he was a multi-sport athlete all the way even into college. So this is the first time in his life he's going to be able to specialize on just football. He's already started to make some plays in camp where they've kind of seen that athleticism where he's like, oh man, this guy was a track star too. If I can kind of see it. So deep league stash, if you can get him and throw him on your taxi squad, he's someone that could maybe have a little bit of sneaky like deep league flex value down the road. When if one of those receivers does get hurt ahead of him, then maybe you have a few weeks where he's like legit flex play.
Andre the Great, we're gonna call him. I really like that kid. He caught my attention
Mm-hmm.
when I was watching the end of year football games as they were on. It's amazing nowadays that you can get everybody. There's a game featuring everybody who is everybody. Even if they're not on a major team. And he looked good. And I agree with you. And here's the strategy that I love in best ball right now with teams like Cincinnati. Obviously, you pay up to get Chase or Higgins. They're both
Right.
quite valuable. But
Very.
later on in the draft, I'm going to take me a Tyler Boyd because he is going to be in best ball. This is a best ball strategy now. I love having Tyler Boyd in best ball. I've got him in quite a few best ball leagues. Yeah, I draft quite a few best ball leagues. So, of course, I got a good selection
Yeah.
of players on my
A
teams.
lot of
But he's
this.
one, yeah, he's one that I look at. And I even had a couple of leagues where I grabbed Sovius as my exit strategy in a larger best ball league because I think he's got the potential to be a player in this league. And the I was as a Purdue guy, I was upset to see Charlie Jones go to the same team because Charlie
Yeah.
Jones has some sneaky talent. He's kind of like
Yeah. Nice.
he's kind of like a larger Ingram, where not
Yeah.
super
Mm-hmm.
he's not super fast. He's not the greatest athlete that you'll ever see. He's sneaky fast. He's got good route running skills, great route running skills, and he's got hands. He doesn't drop the ball. And I was looking for him landing with a team where he could maybe become the third option, but he landed on a team where he could be the third or fourth option. So there's going to be a lot of reasons that Tyler Boyd will be expendable, and it has to be expendable because contracts are going to be too expensive. They need a rookie contract guy to step
Oh,
up, and they
quite a
got
bit.
two good choices there.
Mm. Agreed. Yep. So moving on to the next team, which in my opinion is one of the most fascinating teams in the entire NFL, AFC or NFC, and that is the Cleveland Browns. Um, the biggest storyline here, and it's not I'm not breaking news here. It's just Deshaun will get back in his old self. Um, if he can get back to being that guy that at one point was like the QB 3 or 4 for Dynasty, then Cleveland has a chance to be really good this year. But if he's more of like what he looked like at the end of last year, even though they've been able to restructure that contract, it can start to look a little dicey down the road. He's more like kind of a QB 12 to 16 instead of a top 5 to 6 guy. How are you feeling about Deshaun Watson coming into the season?
Watson is one of those players who I really, really have a wide range of outcomes with him. In fantasy football, like my background's in weather forecasting, okay? And so I approach a fantasy football forecast like I do a weather forecast. And with a weather
Okay.
forecast, if you're forecasting snow for Chicago, for instance, and you say, most likely you're going to get 4 to 6 inches, okay? 60%, 70% likely at a 4 to 6. The client needs to know, okay, if this forecast bombs, am I getting less snow or heavier snow? And as a weather
Okay. Yeah.
forecaster, if you are good at your job, between your primary forecast and your secondary forecast for snow, you should hit it 96% of the time. So I use
Wow.
that same strategy because in weather forecasting, if it's only going to be 2 to 4, if you're wrong on the forecast, they're going to call out the manpower different than if it's
Right.
7 to 10 is the mistake that you're going to make. So in that case, it's the big difference between a significant storm and a major storm. And in fantasy football, you have to look at this the same way. And I see so many analysts that'll say, okay, well, he's the quarterback 8 this year, but
Hmm.
his range of outcomes is 6 to 10 or something like that, where it's smack dab in the middle. Okay.
Hmm.
With Deshaun Watson, it's not smack dab in the middle. I've got his weekly forecast. His upside is maybe like a QB6, maybe. I could
Okay.
make an argument on QB6. I got him more in that 9 to 10 range. The
Yeah. Mhm.
downside of Watson is like QB20. So you've
Yeah.
got this
Mhm.
huge range of logical outcomes with Watson. And if you tell people that forecast, you tell them that range of logical outcomes, it's going to rub them the wrong way. I had to work that pun in there, that joke in about Watson. But the matter is, here's the other thing that's going to hold Watson back. Is this going to be a team that is going to be as pass heavy as the
Yes.
last time he was a significant top 4 fantasy football quarterback? And that answer is no way in hell. I don't see Cleveland throwing the ball a ton. I see Cleveland having a relatively conservative offensive package. I see short
Hmm.
passes. I don't see a lot of running and gunning because, they're not the Houston Texans. This is not Watson's team, and, the team is going to go as well as he goes. This is a team that's got a decent defense. They think it's better than it might be, but they got a decent defense and they got a good solid runner in Nick Chubb. They're going to lean
Hmm.
on the rushing game. They're going to lean on a conservative passing game. And you look at their receivers. Elijah Moore is better in those shorter routes over the middle, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
he's
agree.
got speed. He's got speed, but I think he's better at finding a gap shorter. Amari Cooper is your typical like 7 to 10 yard route guy. He loves
Love
that
him.
that space on the sidelines. And Donovan People Jones and Cedric Tillman, it, none of those guys scream to me wide open passing attack. Okay. Nobody on that roster is going to be confused with a Tyreek Hill or a Jalen Waddle. They just aren't. They're good, solid NFL wide receivers, but they are not the spectacular playmaker types. They're just good, competent wide receivers. I don't see that offense scoring a ton of points. And as a result, that limits Watson's upside quite a bit, in my opinion. And it's very possible the rust never gets knocked off of him and that
Yeah.
he is a QB 20 guy the rest of his career. And that would go down as the absolute worst deal and signing in the history of the NFL. When you pay
Yeah.
a guy that much money who is not at the top of his profession. And I just don't see it. I don't see a situation in which he becomes a top 4 guy again this year.
Yeah, we see the situation very similarly. It leads right into my prediction on this team, and that is that Nick Chubb leads the NFL in rushing while also improving in the passing game, partly because of those short passes that you mentioned. So I think that he's going to be right near career high in catches and targets. And then I do think that he's going to be the main focal point of the offense. People kind of gave Jerome Ford a little bit of sleeper this offseason, but like he's not Kareem Hunt. Like there's nobody behind him unless they bring in Kareem Hunt or Leonard Fournette. There's no one behind him that's going to take him off the field as much as Hunt had the ability to. So I think Chubb has legit like top three running back potential this year, and like you're getting him more towards like running back 8 to 10. He's been like one of my favorites in redraft leagues. I think Dynasty, most running backs you're looking at a 2, maximum 3 year window, anyways. And Chubb, I think for the next 2 years, you are pretty safe that like, at worst you're going to see him drop to like a solid running back 2. But I think he's a pretty safe bet to finish the running back on the next 2.
Yeah, I don't see Chubb as getting a considerable more volume, amount of
Mm-hmm.
volume as he did in the past years. And everybody says, well, but Hunt was, yes, I get that. Ford's not Hunt. Pierre
Mm-hmm.
Strong is not Hunt.
I guess I
But
did just trade him today. Yeah.
yeah, but they don't want to wear down Nick Chubb. Chubb's going to be their bread and butter, and I don't see him getting much more than maybe 19, 20 touches max a game. So, yes, I do like Nick Chubb. He is up towards the top of my rankings.
Mm-hmm.
He is probably one of the more reliable guys that you could pick early in a draft, but I don't look at his volume increase to be there. I don't think he is going to get the super heavy volume. And hey, last year we only saw three guys over 20 touches
Yeah.
a
Mm-hmm.
week. And I don't think he becomes one of them week in, week out. He's going to be close, and he's a good, reliable guy who's going to be a solid starter. But I don't think there's anything else on that roster worth rostering. I did at one point think that Jerome Ford was going to be better than the 2022 version of Kareem Hunt, which was not very good. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the trade for Strong kind of convinced me that I was wrong about Ford as well. Plus, Ford's been
Yeah.
a little bit dinged up in
Mm-hmm.
preseason, and that probably also facilitated the trade as well.
Yep. Agreed there. Rounding out the division here to Pittsburgh, and it's a little bit funny how we've been deprived of football, and then like 3 drives of watching the Steelers team has me questioning my thoughts that I've held the entire offseason. It's just the storyline on this team is this improvement that we've seen from Kenny Pickett and the offense in general, is it legit, or is it just running over preseason defenses? Because I mean, the all offseason my thoughts were like I thought to start, well, we'll go back to the end of last season. Pickett finishes like pretty decent down the stretch. I'm like, okay, there's some flashes. They're going to get rid of the offensive coordinator. They're going to have a new offense. Nope, they bring back Matt Canada. I'm like, oh shit. Like, well, that kind of sucks. And then I'm like, okay, well, the offensive line needs some work, and they made some improvements, but they didn't bring any huge players like that they could have, like, no big names that they brought in. And so I'm like, I think it's going to be another kind of disappointing year for Pittsburgh. And then they come out, and then like their 2 drives that I've watched them play, I was like, holy cow, these guys look amazing. So where are you at? Like help me rationalize this Pittsburgh team and kind of pick it in the offense in general.
It's is it that I hate from last year is how can you not give Mike Tomlin the Coach of the Year award for what he was able to do with that Steelers team? Yeah, I understand it wasn't a championship, but that was a very, very, very bad roster in so many ways with a
Mm-hmm.
rookie quarterback taking over. And he was very careful on not screwing up the rookie by having him throw too much. He was using Pickett
Mm-hmm.
to his strengths. He should have been coach of the year. How many years in a row has he not
Yes.
had a losing season? And that is the
It
amazing
up
thing.
there.
So so I look at this team this year and I'm like, okay. Now last year I forecasted them to win 9 games just because it was Mike Tomlin. And I was
He's
like,
got,
this guy doesn't lose. He can't
yeah.
lose. I don't care how lousy the team is. He's going to find a way to win 9 games. And their
Hmm.
defense wasn't awful. Okay. And they have some good pieces and parts. Deontay Johnson is a great player. He manufactures targets left and right. He just doesn't have the best sure hands in the world, but he is a good playmaker and he gets himself in the end zone. He finds the end zone on his good years. Pickens is an interesting player. The he's an NFL
Hmm.
size kind of guy who should do well. And now
Makes
they bring
plays.
back the ghost of Allen Robinson. Who the heck
Hmm.
knows what A-Rob has left?
He
But
killed me last year. So many leagues.
yeah, and I didn't, I've been out on Robinson since the move to the Rams, and but I look at this situation, I'm going, this is his role. He is the third wide receiver option with two
Mhm.
really good young guys ahead of him. But then you look at this roster and you got Pat Freiermuth, who is one of those tight ends that can absolutely take over a game. He just
Mhm.
doesn't do it every week. But look at the number of times that he had more than 5 targets. And you look at the number of those games versus other tight ends. And other than the elite guys like Kelsey and Edwards, um, Freermuth's got a pretty good record when it comes to
Mhm.
consistency of targets. And that's with a quarterback that was a rookie last year. So, and now you add Darnell Washington, who allows
Mhm.
Muth to play off the line a little bit, not have to do the dirty work of a typical tight end. Uh, there are some options here. And, if Pickett is any good at all as a quarterback, and I don't know. I haven't
Yeah.
seen enough of him to really know. I mean, he's got supposedly the smallest hands in the history of NFL quarterbacking, but he looked pretty good. He wasn't making a lot of mistakes down the road, down the stretch early in the games. When he threw the ball away, it was when he had to force a play at the end of a game. And at those times, I don't care if my quarterback throws an interception. If he throws a 5-yard pass play in the middle of the field that gains like 8 yards and the time
Mhm.
runs out versus throwing it deep and taking a chance and getting beat by a good cornerback, y- you're going to make mistakes at the end of a game. Go for it, man. I just want you to try
Yeah.
to win the game. And I don't want you to be conservative at those points. But early in the game, he didn't make dumb decisions. His interceptions that he had were more of just like desperation moments in games. So I kind of look at him and I say, he might be a better quarterback than I thought.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, my prediction, that's got to happen for my prediction to come true here. And, you're a numbers guy here, so I'm intrigued to see kind of what you think on this. But my prediction for here is that Deontay Johnson, one of the most underrated players for fantasy, in my opinion, he overcorrects from the zero touchdowns last year, and he scores 8 or more this year. Comes a red zone target, just makes up for it, has a monster fantasy season. You buy yourself.
I like that because he's a value play all the way.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting him at a bargain price, and I've seen him drop in drafts to the point where I'm like, I'm not even a big Deontay
So,
Johnson guy, but at this
mm-hmm.
price, I'm a buyer because this guy is a talented player. He's got a lot of spots on my fantasy rosters in Dynasty. I didn't move him. I like him. He's a good, productive player. He's not, in my opinion, a guy you want to build a team around at WR1 or even WR2 in a typical fantasy league. But if he's my third wide receiver when I start three, I like the upside of that guy. And especially if the rook is better his second year, and that often is the case.
Yep, agreed there. All right, well, let's head down south here, and we're going to start with a team that actually has my favorite rookie quarterback in the class, and that is the Houston Texans. Main thing here that I am looking at is just who is going to be the wide receiver one. Because for me, I play mostly dynasty leagues, so like the way I look at the team, where my brain goes is I'm just like the first 4 weeks I'm kind of hunting the skill position here outside of Damian Pierce. I'm kind of thinking long term. I know I like Dell. I think his size caused him to drop a little bit more than he should. So that's the guy that I like here, and it's more of like a second half of the season play. But a lot of people like Nico Collins, Robert Woods is there. Who do you think is the wide receiver one in this offense?
By the end of the year, or let's say by week 10, I think it's got a better than even chance of being John Mechie. This guy, yeah, he's got so much upside, but he's coming off of a life-threatening illness, and he was
and a
playing.
Knee injury, right?
Correct. He's got a lot of stuff on his resume from a bad standpoint, but he played in week 1 of the preseason. The fact that a guy who last year at this time, we didn't know if he would be alive or dead at this time in 2023, could make the field week 1. I think he could play himself into shape. In the meantime, it is a patchwork quilt of talent there. You got the old reliable Bobby Trees, and you got Nico Collins. You got Nico Collins is like, you should be better than this, dude. And he just hasn't had it sort of click in the NFL yet. Then you got guys like Noah Brown who have been good journeyman types that, could be the third option on the team. And then you got Tank Dell. My goodness, this kid is dynamic. And I've got a couple of leagues, Jordan, where they're kind of weird leagues, and you get scorers. You get to score their kick return and punt return yardage and success in the return game.
All my plays, all my leagues, I like to be return.
Yep. Yeah. If I'm getting return yardage in there, Tank Dell is a guy that I'm grabbing, because this guy is going to return some kicks this year. He's going to be a very dynamic player in the kick return game. He is freaking fast, man. This guy, but it's more than just fast. Like, there's some guys in the league that have straight line speed. They're just straight line speed fast. He's got, like, I hate to use this comparison because he's not as good as this player yet, nor will he probably ever be, but he's got the quickest step this side of Tyreek Hill. He has an amazing quickness about him, and just like Tyreek can change directions without seeming to slow down. Slows down less than anybody else in the league when it comes to changing directions. Tank Dell's got that. He is so quick. And he's got great top end speed too. I mean, it's like a Ferrari that can, go up through the gears real fast and hit that high speed and sustainable high speed fast on a football field. The only thing he's got going against him is his size. It would rewrite our, scientific data on height and size of players, but he doesn't get hit hard. That's the thing that impressed me
good at
the
avoiding
most
contact
in the preseason. He's good at avoiding contact, which is also something that Tyreek Hill was good at. Hey, Tyreek Hill is not a big guy. He's got more size, obviously, than Tank Dell, but he's not a huge guy either. And he's been able to survive without getting hit in this league because he knows how to avoid contact. And Dell has that as well. Yep. And I love the rookie quarterback, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good call there. Stroud is, I like him a lot. I think he's going to be the best out of the box as the quarterbacks. I still think Richardson has a little more upside in fantasy, but Stroud might have the most upside as far as becoming a great NFL quarterback. He's got skills. He sees the field well. He does a lot of the intangibles. Plus, he's a heck of a leader. That's the one characteristic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the characteristic that gets undersold. And I like guys in Dynasty who are going to be there a while. And Stroud, I think, has the potential to be the kind of quarterback you build a franchise around.
Yep, I agree with you there. Moving up for day here. Also, sorry, got distracted there for a second with my cat popping up here behind me. Kind of made me laugh.
One more guy on the Texans that I love, because we
Yeah,
we talk about which wide receiver is going to be the guy to own. Dalton Schultz could lead the team in
cousin Schultz,
targets.
baby. Heck yeah.
Yeah, I
He,
like
he was
old
Dallas.
Schultzy, man.
I'm a Cowboys fan, so he was kind of our glue that held us together at times last year. Sucks
And
like the
and
last impression of him is kind of stepping out of bounds and on that catch, and just like, but like he did so many good things for us the last 2 seasons before that.
And Schultz is a guy that my weekly value statistical tool picked up on being a thing in fantasy football long before people discovered it.
Hmm.
This is how long I've been doing it. It nailed Kelsey's breakout season, which was
Okay,
really early
nice.
in his career. It nailed Andrew's breakout season. It nailed Waller's breakout season, and also was
Wow.
correct in forecasting a downtrend for Waller in recent years, and now is forecasting an improvement by Waller this year. But Schultz was one of those guys that I said, man, if you don't get an elite tight end, this is the guy you want to own because of
Steady.
because his value to cost. And I look at this again, I'm shocked at where he's going in drafts. He's on almost every one of my best ball teams because he is cheap and he could
Yes.
lead his team in targets, which is what I like to build my best ball team around, is guys that can lead their teams in targets. And it's very rare at the tight end position. It's Kelsey, Andrews, and maybe Schultz.
Yep, I would agree with you there. The other guy on this offense that I really like, and this could just be trying to speak this into existence because I have him on so many teams. But Damian Pierce, my prediction here is he's going to be a top 12 fantasy back if he stays healthy for 17, and I would say if he stays healthy for 15. I think he's a top 12 running back this season.
And this is Jordan. This is where we just forget year end points. Okay.
Mhm.
I don't care if a guy stays healthy for 15, 16, or 17 games. I don't. I get to replace him when he gets hurt
Yes,
and when he misses games. Damian Pierce is a guy I'm all over this year
yes.
because he's got the potential to be really, really good. And you look at the rest of the roster and you go, who are you going to bench him for?
Mm.
You're obviously going to take him out so you don't run him into the ground, but there ain't nobody else getting that ball around the goal line except for Damian Pierce. He showed
Mm-hmm.
he has a nose and the toughness to get those tough yards. He is not going to be vultured on any touchdowns. He is a great pick this year in all formats.
Absolutely, I agree. I'm glad that you feel the similar way that I do there. So moving over to another team who is not as set at the running back position as I'm sure they would like to be at this point in the offseason. The Indianapolis Colts, man. The only situation, storyline I care about is, JT, man. How is this going to play out? Every other running back so far, Josh Jacobs, just a couple days, they've all caved, they've all came back. What's going to happen here? Because if he's there or not, it's going to affect Anthony Richardson's development in so many ways. So how are you approaching the situation? Like if you have a draft this week, he's available in the third round. I saw a draft here the fourth round. How are you approaching? Do you think he's actually going to sit out?
Yeah, I'm worried about Jonathan Taylor. I really am. So here's the way I do my fantasy forecasts. I forecast my weekly values, the increase or decrease based on the how, did the offense get better, did it get worse? Did the player get better, did it get worse? Has a lot to do with age, has a lot to do with volume. So unlike other fantasy people, I'm a fantasy researcher, I'm not a fantasy analyst, but like a lot of fantasy analysts who will tweak their ratings and their
Yeah.
projections every time a guy coughs. I do it twice during the season, during the preseason. I do it once shortly after the NFL draft, and by the first week in May, usually the first weekend in May, I'm playing with the numbers and I come up with my forecast for the season. When I did that, Jonathan Taylor was my RB1.
Yeah.
The next time I update things is the first weekend of August. I look at my numbers again and look at the start of training camp, all the new news, and now I make my final forecast for the season. He dropped to my RB8. He's going way
Okay.
too early in drafts because, again, just like I mentioned with Deshaun Watson, his range of logical outcomes is about RB5 to about RB40. It's is he going to
Sure.
stay on
Yeah.
the field? Is he even going to be there?
Yeah.
He's outside of my top 25 in some of my rationalization about this season because I just have him sitting out for the first,
Hmm.
I think it's about 10 weeks or 6 weeks before a guy has to return. So his year counts against his contract. I believe it's year 10 or it's week 10 that is the magic week that somebody has to finally come back.
And,
So based on that, they're not going to be. I mean, he could be back to be on the roster, but I just see this as being a deal where both teams are going to, the team and the player are going to be looking for a divorce. And where does he end up? Who knows? And it's just is he hurt? Is he not hurt? There's way
mm,
too many things here. And so
uh,
I've been a big Deion Jackson and Evan Hull buyer in the
Evan
late
Hall, yeah.
portions of best ball drafts because I look at Hull and I look at him from Northwestern. I'm like, that he's tough. He's a good hard nosed player. That's the kind that Ursay is probably going to like. And Deion Jackson has been okay from a fantasy perspective when he's gotten, more than 30 offensive snaps in a game. He's actually got a pretty good consistency record of at least getting you 10 points. So I look at those two guys as bargain basement best ball ads because of the
Hmm.
uncertainty at the position. But the number one rusher on that team, if Jonathan Taylor doesn't show up, is going to be Anthony Richardson. He's going to
Oh
have
yeah.
1,500 yards. Who the heck knows? I mean,
Sign me up.
when I saw him in preseason, I'm looking at him, I'm going, did did I just press the wrong button? Am I looking at the Tennessee Titans and Derrick Henry just changed his hairdo? That's how
Hmm.
big he looks on the field when you're
He's
watching him
huge.
run.
Yeah, he's huge.
Incredible. But I do like Anthony Richardson. I think he's going to be a really good quarterback in this league, and not just because he runs. He's going to be valuable in fantasy. Yeah, he's going to run for his life the first couple of years, but when
Yeah.
this kid learns how to play the NFL game, and I think he's got it in him to learn how to
Yeah.
play the NFL game. He's a very raw talent, very few games in college. And that is scary because we've seen a lot of these guys coming out like a Trubisky, uh,
Hmm.
is one that comes to mind that had very few games. Lance is another one who recently, everybody was in love with, and I'm looking at the number of games he played. And I'm like, I don't like the look of that.
Sketchy.
So Richardson has some of that going for him, where he hasn't played a lot of games as a starter in college, but I still look at him developing. But you're right, that running back situation is, ooh, it's scary. If I was a Colts fan, I'd be a little worried.
Definitely. And so one of the things, I guess, for my prediction here, when you're talking about, Richardson and lack of experience in college, my prediction, a guy that has the exact opposite of that and has tons of college production, Josh Downs. I think he is a PPR sleeper, but what I'm thinking here is by the end of this season, he establishes himself as like a top half of the league wide receiver two. Not necessarily fantasy, but a guy that when you turn on the tape and you're watching what he's actually doing on the field, you're like, okay, he's probably in the top half of like the number twos in this team. I think Michael Pittman's going to be the guy in the passing game, but I think that you're going to watch what he does, and I think that especially your PPR leagues, I think he could challenge in years 2 and 3 for like the league receiving points for all the fantasy options there on Indianapolis. So I really like Josh Downs. Where do you come in on him?
Downs is another quick guy who knows how to get open, man. He
Mm-hmm.
finds the little seams. At least that's what he did in college, and I think he'll have the same level of success, to some point of being able to find those gaps in the pros. I love Michael Pittman. He is one of
Yeah.
my value plays at wide receiver. When I look at a player's weekly value compared to their ADP, I call it plus zone, where
Mm-hmm.
his value is greater than his ADP. So, he's a bargain for me, and he's on a lot of my teams that start three wide receivers. He's my WR3, and I'm loving it because he's
Mm-hmm.
got low end W1 potential. He's really a WR2 level guy. He's going to be in that 15th to 20th best, and he's coming cheap enough, and he's going to give you some spike weeks, especially in best ball. But I agree with you with Downs. He is the guy that is a good pick at value. To come on, who else he's got to beat? Alec Pierce,
That's
Isaiah
about it,
McKenzie.
really. Yeah,
There's really
Paris
nothing
Campbell's
there.
on.
Yeah, and you got Jelani Woods is not going to open the season because he's hurt. So
Yeah,
that's
the
another receiving option that is not there. Where does Downs find himself open in the relatively short target areas? And that's what rookie quarterbacks love is those little short routes where they can script the guy open.
Yep,
And you can script Downs open and get him the ball. He's going to make some plays for you.
I agree with that. Man, so I didn't realize how much rookie talk was in this conference, and so I'm a big rookie and a draft guy. So this is great for me. So moving over to our next team here, Jacksonville. We'll go ahead and stick the rookie team here. One of the arguably the biggest risers during the preseason here has been Tank Bigsby. Just how much of the role of Travis Etienne is he going to eat into, and how are you looking at this backfield coming into the season?
Well, ATN could not hold down a high volume against a lot less talent than
Mm-hmm.
Bigsby. So I'm looking at this as being a pretty even split in the volume. ETN is going to get a lot of the receptions. There's no doubt about that. He is a dynamic playmaker, and there's nothing against him as a player. I just think Bigsby is a guy that you can lean on to run the
Yeah.
ball a little bit more consistently than
Mm-hmm.
ETN between the tackles. ETN is a talent, but it's like, why not have two really good running backs on the team? Here's the thing, Jordan, that a lot of fantasy football players do not realize. And I'm gonna break the news to you right now for your listeners and viewers, and they're gonna
Oh,
be shocked
lucky.
by this. Are you ready?
Let's hear it.
Football coaches don't care about our fantasy football teams.
It's
They
rude,
care
but it's
about
true.
winning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why do we always sit there and think, "Oh, this guy should be using so and so more"?
Mm-hmm.
No, he's doing what's good for winning real football games because guess what? His contract doesn't get renewed because D Mike had a 3.5 to 1 return on investment because he had his guy on your team. He goes to another contract and gets to have vacations in the Bahamas with his family and buy a place
Mm-hmm.
in the Bahamas if
Sure.
he is a winning coach in the NFL. And if you've got two dynamic players like Bigsby and ETN, why aren't you going to use them both? And
Mm-hmm.
and look at ETN's numbers in college. He shared the load. He's going to share the load in the NFL. And they're both going to be guys that are going to have value in fantasy football, but their upside potential is capped by the fact that there's two really good running backs on the same team.
Agree with you there. Prediction time for these guys, and the kind of the narrative around this player has made me feel like I'm taking crazy pills a little bit at times this offseason. But prediction here, man, Calvin Ridley. I feel like based off the hype he has as ADP, I feel like he's a disappointment, or he's going to let a lot of teams down here. I think Berkeley in receiving yards again. I don't know, man. He wasn't great before he took like the half season off for like to kind of deal with some first stuff off the field, which good for him. But then a whole extra year away from the game after that for the suspension. I'm not sure he comes back in as a 2029 and is that borderline top 10 dynasty receiver, and a lot of guys are convinced that's what he's going to do. So I'm cooled on him a little bit. How are you on him coming into the year?
I looked at his back class and I used the back class term. And you hear the black back class term and you're, what the hell is that all about? That's a horse racing analogy. Okay. There are a lot of similar. When I was a teenager, I was a professional harness racing handicapper for a couple of summers. So this is the crazy things that
Okay.
I forecasted in my life. But in horse racing, there's such a thing as back class. You look at a horse who is coming back to the track or have been racing against lesser competition, and you look back 5 or 6 races and you say, "Holy crap! This horse ran against stakes race caliber
Mm-hmm.
horses, and now he's competing against a $30,000 claimer. He's in a position where his back class says he's a good pick in this game or in this race. Ridley, his back class, if you look at it and you adjust it for being somewhat conservative because he's got a lot of rust on him. I mean, we're talking a couple of years since his back class was there. I use a 2-year window. He barely touches that because he was
Mm-hmm.
out for a year and then he was suspended for a year. But if you go back to his back class, if I look back 2 cycles of weekly values ago and I adjust that for common sense, he forecasted out as my WR16 this year.
Wow.
Early
Okay.
early in drafts, he was going 25 to 30th as far as wide receiver over the board off the board, and he was on a lot of my early teams and a
Yeah.
few of my new upstart dynasty teams because he was being he was being dropped lower in the draft because he's at an older age. Well, I don't care about that in dynasty. I want my players to be in that 26 to 30-year-old ranking as
Yeah.
30 year I want 26
That's
to 30-year-old wide receivers. I want a couple of those. Then I'll add some youth to my team
sure.
so I don't get old all at the same time. But because of that, Ridley was dropping way down. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm adding him. He's got back class. I'm adding him. He's in a good offensive situation. He's got an excellent quarterback
That's true.
in
Mhm.
Trevor Lawrence. He is going to have the upside of a late WR1 most weeks. He'll be 10th, 12th best on any given week. I think is his regular finishing point. Yeah, he'll have some spike weeks where he's top 5 and everybody gets excited. But if you look at the majority of his finishes in fantasy football, he's going to be 10th to 12th on a good week. He's going to be 15th to 25th on a bad week. That ain't a
Yeah.
bad week. But
Okay.
at his current ADP, I think he's being overdrafted a little bit. He went from a
Mm.
guy that was a value to a guy that's being drafted basically at or slightly above his ceiling, to be honest with you.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree there on that one. Um, well, all right, let's head to the last team here. And this is the team I have found myself down on compared to a lot of guys, and that is the Tennessee Titans here. Main storyline, and I think that this team's success can kind of hinge on this, is Traylon Burks. Can he shake off this early injury and enjoy the full breakout season that a lot of people had anticipated? What are your thoughts on this passing game in general, and then also Traylon Burks' outlook?
Never been a big fan of Traylon Burks.
I
He was
haven't
not a
either.
guy. Yeah, not a guy I really expected to be the all that guy. So I wasn't surprised when he's been kind of a okay NFL
Mm-hmm.
player. And now you add Hopkins to the mix, and you got Kyle Phillips, an up and coming guy who might be as good as Burks, believe it or not. So I look at that threesome and I said, nah, I'm not too crazy about it. But then I also look at the Tennessee Titans offense and I say, they've been in the bottom 10 in passing as far as the number of pass plays in a game. Been
Mm-hmm.
bottom 10 for like 3 years in a row. Why is it not going to be 4 years in a row? Did Derrick Henry die? I mean, if you are going to win games as the Tennessee Titans, you're going to play tough defense and you're going to run the ball. You're not going to take a lot of chances with the ball. And so I don't look at the passing game as being all that delicious with Tennessee.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Um,
I look at a lot of guys, a lot of mouths to feed for those targets too, because
yeah.
Chiggy at tight
We
end,
didn't even mention
Conquo
Chig. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
he had a good
He's
season at the
athletic.
end. If you look at the games where he played 30 or more snaps, his consistency was over 80% of getting you 10 points as a tight end. That's a heck
Yeah.
of a player. Didn't have it's a small sample size though, okay? But it was a small sample size for the sun god, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and
Until it
he
wasn't. Yeah.
delivered, okay? So I look at Chiggy as being a solid late round tight end pick. But because you got Chiggy, you got, Burks, you got or y-
Yeah.
and you got
Hopkins.
Phillips and you got Hopkins, you got a lot of mouths to feed for a team that is not going to be throwing the ball very often. So I don't look at anybody on that team as being somebody I want in redraft.
I'm kind of with you there. I think that like my prediction for this team, I think that this team's going to struggle this year a lot, and I think that 12 months from now we're going to be entering kind of the youth movement built around Traylon Burks, Tajay Spears, Chig, and then Will Levis, Malik Willis actually looked okay in the preseason this year, so maybe a different quarterback altogether. But at this time next year, I think that the youth movement will kind of be really really getting going there in Tennessee. Um,
And yeah,
yeah.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And while the king is still the king, Derrick Henry is still a solid NFL player. He was a guy that the weekly values really nailed on his uprising of being a great player. A
Mm-hmm.
14% drop in his weekly value last season versus the season before. Players, once they start declining at running back and they're over the age of 27, they have never rebounded from that. And in fact, they've actually accelerated their decline. So 14% drop in weekly value is huge when you're looking at a 2-year window for a player. So I'm looking at bad things for Derrick Henry. Not that he's going to be a total collapse, but he might be picked a little too high right now.
I would agree
And I
with that.
agree that I agree Tennessee's going to struggle.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of the easier calls for me this year. So heading over to our last division, and apologies for running a little long. You need to speed this up. You just let me know. Um, but we got the West here. We'll round it out here. We'll start with the team that has got definitely the headlines this offseason, and that is the Denver Broncos. Um, Big question there, storyline we're all following is, can Sean Payton clean up the mess that Russ made last year, Nathaniel Hackett, or is it just kind of is this what we can expect from them at this point?
Whew. Okay, so wearing the Chiefs colors, my St. Patrick T-shirt on. So
Love it.
my westernly comments can sometimes be biased by the fact that I'm a huge Chief fan. But having said that, I've also been a big Sean Payton fan over the years because he made my man Drew Brees from Purdue look like one hell of a quarterback, a Hall of Famer. And I didn't necessarily think that of Brees coming out of college. I knew he was a great college quarterback. Wasn't sure he was going to be a great NFL quarterback. And Sean Payton turned him into a great
Yeah.
quarterback in the NFL by understanding a player's strengths and coaching the team to that player's strengths. Having said that, Sean Payton understands that he's got a really good defense with the Denver Broncos. That's the thing that got lost in that lousy season last year. Is their defense was really good, and too often the offense was getting them in a negative field position situation where they only had a 30-yard field or 20-yard field to defend, and they gave up points. But that is a very very stout defense that I think even might have gotten better in the
Mm-hmm.
offseason. Plus Sean Payton's a hell of a coach, so he's going to bring out even more in those best players. But the rest of the team, my goodness, I don't know what the hell to expect from the Denver Broncos this year because it all starts and ends at the quarterback position. Is
Mm-hmm.
Russell Wilson the Russell Wilson we saw of a couple of years ago? Notice I don't say in his best years, but are we looking at 2020 or
Yeah.
2021 Russell Wilson, or are we looking at 2022 Russell Wilson, who was just awful? I think we're going to be looking at something in the middle. I don't see Russell Wilson ever returning to his once greatness. I think it was a dumb contract to tie yourself into a guy of that age and that size, because typically the shorter quarterbacks have not aged well when
Mm-hmm.
running is a big part of their game. And Russell Wilson's an excellent passer. He's been able to sustain some fantasy greatness with two wide receivers in the past
Mm-hmm.
with Seattle, but I just don't know what Russell Wilson we're going to get this year. I'm thinking, you know, upside 10th, 12th best in fantasy,
Best case.
downside maybe 20th. So I just
Yeah.
don't see that. But in real NFL terms, if they run the ball heavy and utilize what Russell Wilson does the best, which is be able to keep the box from being stacked because he's still got a live arm and he's got a wide receiver in Judy when he's healthy who can make the plays. Are you going to be looking at a situation where you get enough out of Russell Wilson to keep teams from stacking the box and you can grind out a much better offense? Sean Payton's a genius as a coach. He will
Yeah.
find a
100%.
way to make this team more successful than it was last year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and that's part of like why I feel my way I do in my prediction. And this is one that I've held this prediction for a few months, but the closer we've gotten, the more news has come out, the less and less hot of a take it's been. But when I first had it, it was a hot take, and that is Javonte Williams. I think that he is going to kind of defy medical science a little bit, and he's going to be a top 24 fantasy running back this year, and that will be his floor moving forward in Dynasty. I think he's going to go back into being kind of that. I don't think he's going to get back to being the RB2 or 3 overall in Dynasty, but I think he's a guy that if you can put him in there as your RB2 next year, you're going to be loving it because he's going to have a lot of weeks where he does splash and have those RB1 weeks, partly because of what Sean Payton's been able to do running backs historically in his offense. So I'm all the way in on Javonte Williams, and just seeing how quickly he's came back, it just made me feel strong about it.
His upside potential is top 10, in my opinion, right away this year. And again, I don't look at year end stats. I think that Peyton and the staff will be very conservative with him. So I think we're going to see with these 17 game schedules now in the NFL and the way the game is evolving, we are going to see the equivalent of load management like we've seen in the NBA.
Yeah,
So I think if these
absolutely.
guys have minor aches and pains, or, in the case of Javonte Williams, a medical history, if he has a short turnaround for a week, they're not going to play him. Or if he
Mm-hmm.
has a tough game the week before where he gets beat up a little bit,
Physical, yeah.
they're going to rest him. But he is going to give you, when he starts and he plays more than 30 snaps, so he gives you a really full game. I consider a full game for a running back now 20 or more snaps. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
fair.
how much of a running back shared backfield league this has become. But if he sees the majority of snaps, because there's about 65 snaps in a game, typical offensive snaps in a game, if he sees 30 of them or more, he's going to be a top 10 guy. This is a tough, hard nosed runner. And here's the thing, I trust the doctors more than I trust fantasy analysts when it comes to injuries.
Yes.
And I don't care about, guy coming back from this or that injury. He's never done more than this. Who cares? Like, medical science is getting better with these guys each and every year.
Absolutely.
And
Mm-hmm.
and if he was able to not be put on the pup list, this guy's
Yeah,
ready. He's going to
he's
have a heck
ready.
of a season.
He
He's
looked
on a
good out.
ton. He's on a ton of my teams this year because while he's going to get maybe 30 snaps in a game, at the top end because they got some talent behind him. They don't have to grind him into the ground. But of the 30 snaps, he's going to get 15 to 20 touches. I'll take
Mm-hmm.
15 or 20 touches, especially when I'm going to get all the touches around the goal line.
Yep, I'm with you there. So okay, let's head over to the team that I'm sure you'll have some opinions on there. Let's go to Kansas City here. Storyline that I'm following there is anybody besides Travis Kelce going to come as like a clear cut second option, or is it just going to be a rotating cast of guys behind Kelce again once again?
Here's the thing is I can separate my fandom from my fantasy footballdom when it comes to my favorite team. And last year when Tyreek Hill left, I said
Mm-hmm.
two things and I was laughed off the internet about them. I said this offense is going to be a hell of a lot better next year without
Mm-hmm.
Tyreek Hill. And it's not that Tyreek Hill isn't one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. It's that teams figured out how to take him away from games. And the team didn't respond as well as they should have of how to adjust to that. because they just took the deep play away from Mahomes, and Mahomes loves to be the gambler. He loves to
Mhm.
be throwing the ball, and he's got a high percentage of completing the pass that I ain't going to argue with St. Patrick. But here's the thing. He told us what this offense was going to look like
Yeah.
last year.
Mhm.
He told us don't expect anybody to replace Tyreek Hill. That was last year's roster, not this year's roster. This year's roster, I think you might have a borderline WR2 starter on here. Now, here's the problem. I don't know whether it's Tony, whether it's Rashee Rice, whether it's Moore, or whether
Mhm.
it's Justin Ross by later in the season if he can stay healthy. They got
Yeah.
4 guys capable. So, how am I handling this as a fantasy football manager? I'm in avoidance mode, except for a fourth or fifth wide receiver on my team from the Kansas City Chiefs. How am I
Mhm.
handling this in best ball? I want 2 or
All.
3 of those guys on my team. So this is the difference in formats. If you have to set your lineup, you have to do some sort of analysis to figure out what the matchup is.
Mhm.
I ain't good at that. Okay. I'm better
It's
at
not easy.
filling a roster than I am filling a lineup. And so that's why I love best ball, because best ball, I can craft a roster that will beat your team. And when I craft my roster, I want wide receivers, I want tight ends from really good passing attacks. And I don't
Mhm.
care if they give me 3 points 6 weeks in a row. I'm just loving the week they give me 20 points plus. And that's what the Chiefs are. They're going to be a boom and bust scenario. But one of those guys could emerge as the
Yeah.
regular guy to be the second target guy on the team this year. There is so much more talent in that KC wide
Yes.
receiver room at this time today, 2023, than this day last year because they didn't have Tony on the roster. I know a lot of people are out on Kadarius Tony because he's a head case and he's a crazy
Explosive,
person.
man.
He's nuts, but he's explosive and he gets hurt a lot. They don't like the injuries. They don't like the head case of him. Andy Reid is a player's coach. If anybody can get the best out of Kadarius Tony, it will be Andy Reid. He is the kind that
Yeah.
gets along with anybody, and as long as and if he doesn't, if you're no longer getting along with him, you ain't going to be on the roster very long. We've seen that
Right.
as well. So they will make a move to get him off the roster if he is head case city. But he's got so much talent, but so does Rashee Rice. This guy
Yeah.
could be
I
the
think
sleeper of all sleepers. And then Justin Ross has also got some talent. I've looked at the Sky Moore college stats and the people that believe in the dominator, and all this stuff.
mm,
And you look at the percentage and you look at how often he just absolutely took over a game. That Kansas City Chiefs passing offense is one of the toughest offenses to learn. That's why they love to bring in these veterans like MVS, like Demarcus Robinson. They're not great players, but they
mhm.
fill a role. They're good blocking wide receivers, which fills a role, and they can make the occasional play when needed. But in this case, the Chiefs have 4 guys who are dynamo playmakers, and it's just a matter of who is going to emerge. And it's a possibility that it could be a different guy every week, which is why I like him more in best ball than I do redraft or dynasty.
Yeah, I mean, my prediction is pretty much exactly what you said there. My prediction is I think they're basically going to be the same as they were for fantasy last year. I think it's going to be Kelsey. It's going to be a rotating cast of guys behind them. And I think they're going to repeat and they're going to win the Super Bowl, go back to back.
And a best ball strategy tip for you: last pick, last round pick in your fantasy draft. If you own Travis Kelsey, if you took him in the first round in your best ball draft, which is what you got to do to get him nowadays, you better be exiting your draft with Noah Gray. Noah Gray
Mhm.
is a tremendous player who will give you some scoring weeks as a red zone touchdown threat, even with Kelsey healthy. But if something happens to Kelsey, Noah Gray's got the talent to step right into that role. Not be as good as Kelsey, but 70% of Kelsey is better than most tight ends in the league.
100% there. Let's move on here. We got two teams left. In my opinion, one of them that's a lot of fun for fantasy, and the other one that's got a couple pieces, but overall I'm a little bit down on. So we're going to start with the team I'm down on here, and that's the Las Vegas Raiders here. So looking at them, I mean, the storyline I'm following is how soon, like, what would you set the over under on weeks before we're hearing fans call for Aiden O'Connell over Jimmy G?
Well, Garoppolo might not make it past 6 weeks this year. He is not entering the season healthy anyway.
Right.
So, and Aiden O'Connell, okay, I'm a pretty guy. Aiden O'Connell is not an NFL quality quarterback. He his stats looked great in college, and he's got an arm where he can make some plays, but he can also turn the ball over, and that is going
Mm-hmm.
to kill you in the NFL. He's great at throwing to open receivers. He throws too many 50-50 balls, in my opinion. Uh, Loved him as a college player, not crazy about him as an NFL player. And if he ends up as the starter by, say, week 4 or 5, they will be in the Caleb Williams
Yep.
territory in the draft next year.
Yep, I'm with you there. Prediction for these guys, I think Josh Jacobs is going to be awesome. Looking at the passing game outside of Devontae Adams, we're going to go Jacoby Myers here. I do think that for deeper leagues, he's going to be a good flex and like buy injury fill in. But I don't think that he's ever going to be a top 30 wide receiver again, unless they do land a Caleb Williams, Drake Mason, where they can sustain two receivers. But I think this is going to be a Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs very dominant offense.
Yeah, and I'm worried about Jacobs because typically, I haven't done the scientific study on this one, but my brain reminds me that a few of the times where I had guys who were coming back late from holdouts, they seem to have a lot of hamstring injuries. Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
only when they're on my roster, but it's a case where I'm worried about Josh Jacobs' longevity in the NFL.
Yeah.
He is
Mm-hmm.
he has carried and taken a bunch of hits.
He has
This
been
this is
awful
a
for him.
He's a tough kid, but there comes a time when you can't have enough. The way NFL teams are treating running backs is just crazy. They're going to run these guys into the ground when they don't want to sign them to long-term contracts, and unless they change the rookie numbers again for running backs, we're going to see a complete changing of how running backs. So we're going to see even fewer running backs valued. And I agree, Devontae Adams, he could be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy football if I was throwing him the ball.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's
So good.
that's how great this guy is going to be. So I'm not looking at whoever's throwing the ball because you don't get points off of Devontae Adams for the interceptions thrown by the quarterback. So I'm looking at Devontae Adams as being a solid pick again this year. And Jacobs, I kind of am avoiding him because I just don't know how good this Raiders team is going to be. And I tend to draft more of my running backs off of winning teams.
Makes sense to me. Let's head over to our last team here. We got the Los Angeles Chargers, and I'm going to kind of combine my prediction, my story into one because they kind of tie in together. My prediction here is just the combination of Kellen Moore and Justin Herbert is he's just going to be unlocked. It's going to be an explosive, crazy good offense for fantasy. The storyline I am following is are we going to finally have some touchdown regression for Austin Eckler, or is he just going to be even better at finding the end zone with Kellen Moore calling plays? Like it seems like Eckler's kind of the RB2, especially for redrafts coming off the board. And like if you're telling me there's one guy that I had to bet on outside of McCaffrey to like have another third year in a row of great touchdown luck, it's Eckler is the guy. But history says that's probably not going to happen to that level again. And then at that point, are you paying RB2 prices for like an RB8 to 10? If you touchdowns in half, that's a big drop off. How are you looking at this offense, specifically Eckler, and then the offense as a whole with Kellen Moore calling plays?
I'm waiting to see where Austin Eckler, if he drafts himself in the first round this year in his fantasy league. He's actually a big fantasy football nut, and he's been one of
Yeah,
the
it's
guys that I
awesome.
I absolutely love because he has embraced fantasy football, unlike so many of the players and coaches who have not.
I don't care
Fantasy
about your
football
team.
Yeah, fantasy football has been great for the growth of the NFL. I mean, it grew.
Mhm.
The NFL red zone wouldn't be as popular if it wasn't for all the fantasy football nuts out there. I tend to love NFL red zone, even if I don't have fantasy, uh,
Mhm.
players on the line because I don't like commercials. But that's just me. I'm a short attention span guy. But yeah, when it comes to the Chargers, here's what I don't understand, and for the life of me, Dallas Cowboys fans were saying that Moore was the problem with their
Which they were
offense
wrong.
last
I'm a
year.
Cowboys fan, and they are wrong. I
So,
was so mad they let him
yeah.
go.
So, how can he now be the answer if he was the problem? I don't get that, and I don't get McCarthy as coach either. So that I'm
I'm
having a
hoping
tough time
asterisks.
understanding the Cowboys' logic over there. But yeah,
Don't
Justin
spend a lot
Herbert.
of time. It'll give you headaches.
Yeah, exactly. Justin Herbert is an amazing quarterback who has been used improperly over the last couple of years. Plus, did the Chargers suddenly forget how to play defense? I mean, they have been
Mhm.
playing from behind so often that they put Herbert in a bad situation right from the start. So I love the back class of Herbert. I know he's a relatively young player, but I'm going to use the back class because his second year in the league was much better than what he was last year. So I
Yes.
think he will revert to that form because while his offensive coordinator had a famous last name last year, he must have been the idiot in that family because I don't understand that offense and how they
Yeah.
used their guys last year. And I look at another one of my hot rookies that got drafted by the Chargers, and this scares the hell out of me as a Chiefs fan because Quentin
Mm.
Johnson being
Yeah.
added to a roster that also already includes one of my all-time favorite fantasy football players in Keenan Allen. 96% consistency rate over the last 4 years in scoring at least 10 points in all of his
That's
full games.
crazy.
That's insanity. It's the most consistent guy. You can I'll take the 10 points. Thank you very much. And this year, Keenan Allen's going late. Michael Williams is going late. Joshua Palmer's being ignored. Quentin Johnson is going late. You got four wide receivers on that team that on any given week can make the big play and score a touchdown when they're healthy. And yes,
Mhm.
Keenan Allen and Michael Williams have missed a lot of games over the last couple of years combined. But when they're on the field, they're monsters. And
Mhm.
now you're going to see Quentin Johnson stepping into that offense as well. And then you got Austin Eckler, who has defied all logic. I mean, this is an undrafted free agent who is not the typical NFL size that you would expect for a guy that can find the end zone as often as he does. He's just elusive and he finds these seams. You give him the ball or you throw him the ball out on the outside and then let him make a play. He's going to make the play. So I look at this team as being one of the best offenses in the league this year. And I think they're going to throw even more
Mhm.
often. And I look at this being kind of like the Chiefs offense from
Just light.
from a few years back where remember when Mahomes had to throw the ball because that's about all they could do
Yeah.
because their defense was, like Swiss cheese. And I don't think the Chargers improved enough on defensive side of the ball. So I think they're going to be in a lot of shootouts this year. And so unless you're playing a really tough secondary, I'm looking at Herbert being able to put up some really huge numbers outside of the top three quarterbacks, which is no surprise. I'm not making any earth breaking decisions and announcements here by saying that, Mahomes, Allen, and Hertz in any order are the top three quarterbacks in fantasy football. Herbert's number 4 right now. He is
Yeah.
really, really good, and
It's
I think
awesome.
he's got the potential to beat out Josh Allen. Not sure he's got the potential to beat out a healthy Mahomes or a healthy Hurts, but he's got upside, quarterback 3 upside right now, and his downside is like quarterback 8. So he's got that consistency that you want to see in a quarterback. So he's one of my favorite guys to roster, and that is one of my favorite teams to roster guys off of, because I don't know what the heck's going on with the fantasy football world undervaluing Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Quentin Johnson. I've taken 2 of those 3 in best ball. I've taken 2 of those 3 in redraft leagues, and I will play 2 of their wide receivers in redraft on a weekly basis if you give me a chance, because they're going to be just that good.
Absolutely. Well, D-Mike, man, I appreciate you coming on. I told you when we first started, hey, this last one went about an hour and 20. I'll try and keep this one to about an hour. We're hour 45. So I appreciate you sticking with me. Appreciate your time. I had a lot of fun discussing these guys. So yeah, thank you for coming on. And then tell the people where they can find you. What websites you got, where you can find you on Twitter, what projects and what stuff can they look forward to in the upcoming few weeks. Yeah.
Easiest way to find me is on Twitter, right there, DMike Media on Twitter. You're probably playing against me in a sleeper league or an FPPC league, because I've been in enough of them. I get a kick out of these people that say, oh, yeah, I'm playing 10 fantasy football leagues this year. I'm drafting 10 leagues right now, okay? And so you're probably going to see DMike show up in a league near you. And I use that moniker in everything I do. So you'll see DMike Media or DMike. You'll know that I'm playing against you. So if you get to beat me, go ahead and take the victory lap on Twitter. I don't mind. But you'll see me on Twitter there. Scienceoffantasyfootball.com. That's our little hangout. That's our little fantasy football laboratory. That's where the professor, John Bush, and I do all of our work. But you also catch my Data Lab podcast with the professor on For Frequency's Sake. And if you haven't checked those guys out yet, at forfrequencysake.com, they do an excellent job. Got a great variety of podcasts. And coming September 13th, the Pod This Network, podthisnetwork.com. It is more than just fantasy football, folks. It is everything except for politics. We will not allow a political podcast on Pod This, but we're also going to be looking for new hosts of podcasts. So we've got a lot of clients that want podcasts. We need more voices, because this guy ain't doing 40 podcasts a week. So there'll be some work for folks, and we want to help bring some work to folks in the fantasy football world. They won't be fantasy football podcasts necessarily, folks, although we will consider housing your podcast as another source. But fantasy football people are good at adapting to change and rolling with the punches. So you'll be good at podcasts for any subject that we help teach you about. But check us out, podthisnetwork.com. Coming soon to an internet near you.
I love it. Awesome, man. I appreciate you coming on again, man. This was a great time. Everybody else here, make sure you guys hit subscribe and like. Again, see it scrolling across the bottom here, fantasy6pack.net/plans. Come check us out. Come hop in that Discord. I'll answer your fantasy questions there. And, man, we're talking about this time next week. We're going to be a couple days away from kickoff. It's the best time of the year. Cannot wait, man. Again, I appreciate your time. And, yeah, we'll have to do this again this season. This was a lot of fun.
All right, Jordan, you take care, and you did a great job of hosting the show as always, young man. And hey, anytime you got me on, you can tap another 30 minutes onto the show. How about that?
Hey, sign me up. I love it. Awesome, man. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care.